career. I knew I wanted to be an equipped and skilled leader. We talk about natural born leaders, and I do believe that there are some people who are naturally have a inclination and an instinct to be kind of that leader of the pack. It doesn't mean they're effective leaders, right? So to be an impactful leader, you have to study, you have to hone your craft. I look at some of the best athletes in the world. Obviously, the GOAT, and you can fight me. Anybody can fight me on this. All our new generation, but Michael Jordan is the GOAT of all goats, and there will never be another GOAT. But I look at, rest in peace, the dear Kobe Bryant, someone who I love dearly, who was he was the baby goat, if you will.
Yeah.
Both of those guys tenacious about how they worked. You can be very talented, but if you don't put the time and the work in
Yeah.
to do game speed practice, Jordan used to practice at game speed. All his teammates say this mother effer would come in there. Excuse my colorful language, but this dude would challenge us
Yeah.
in practice at game speed and make sure we all did the same thing. And if you didn't, he would be ready to fight you. And so it is that type of, in the laboratory, proving yourself, practicing these skill sets, seeing what really works. But then there's the inner work on who you are as a person. Now, I do value being what I hope is a blessing to other people.
Yeah.
I don't just want to help people make money. I want to help people live better lives. And so my kind of multifaceted approach to leadership is that I don't need to just have the most high performing, high grossing types of enterprises. I need to be helping to produce leaders of integrity, leaders with character, an environment where people thrive because there is true camaraderie, there is true authenticity. It's why I created Virtuous Innovation, because I wanted to bring all my worlds together and be able to put those virtues on the table as things that can build scalable, very profitable, very successful companies, but you don't have to be an a-hole while you do it.
Yeah.
And you can be doing things that are improving the lives of other people.
So welcome to another episode of the Pepper Soup Talk Show. My name is Aki. I'm here with my partner, Toby. Now, a little bit earlier, before we get into it, a friend was asking me who we're talking to this evening. And I realized as I was describing this person that I was almost at a loss for words, because this individual has done so much and in so many different lanes over the course of his career. Whether we're talking about being a Fortune 100 bred entrepreneur, whether we're talking about starting, leading, exiting venture-backed companies, to being humanitarian, having been a part of the relief efforts of some of the biggest natural disasters that the world has seen, to literally even being an ordained pastor, which we'd love to hear more about as we get into the talk. But this individual is really a modern day Renaissance man. And we are honored to have him on the show today, to peel back the layers, to learn about how he became the person he is today, and for him to share the knowledge and wisdom that he has with our audience. And so, without further ado, I would like to welcome to Pepper Soup Talk, Shelton Mercer III.
Oh, wow. Well, Aki, I appreciate that. It's good to see you, and good to be here. That was a lot of pomp and circumstance. I think I know a guy that resembles those accolades there.
No, we when your executive manager sent over your CV and bio, we said we're saying it feels like we're going back to college now, because it was like a whole college course, like studying your your list of accolades and everything that you've done. So Shelton, if we could start with the beginning, though, like I know you're from Philadelphia originally, but if you can first speak to our audience around like how where you're from and sort of like what your early years were like.
Yeah. Well, first, I mean, listen, I'm gonna go off script because you, Aki, have special place in my heart and my world as a leader. And I'm sure your audience knows about some of your journey as a leader, and I'm just over the moon to be on the other side of the camera as you start this. Not start, but you've been redoing this next chapter for you. And some people may know I had the pleasure of you stumbling into our laps some years ago when we were launching the Innovation Center, and your excellence as a I used to call you the OG, right? You were one of our longest tenured and oldest hired staff employees with Innovation, and so I want to
Yeah.
say first of all, man, my love for you and just admiration for you as a emerging leader has been since those days in 2016, and they still persist. And I'm so proud to see what you're doing, and really glad that you're taking all that energy that I hope I had a little bit to give you some gas in the tank, and you're taking it to new levels. So I'm honored to be here because it makes my heart feel great to see leaders like you taking it to the next level.
I appreciate, really appreciate, appreciate the kind words, and especially appreciate you taking the time to be here, with us. I mean, we know that you're in. We see the trees in the back, and we know that you're right now. So
Yeah,
it's
I'm out in the mountains, but I wanted to make sure we made this time. So
thank you.
anyway, back on script. You guys want to know what the origin, how it started? Wow, was this one time at band camp that I had an idea. That's a bad joke. Origin story of give me some prompts. Give me some prompts here
No,
from
yeah.
entrepreneurial. Yeah, there's so many threads, right? So help me out, guys.
So well, let's start with your name, Shelton Mercer
Mm,
the third. And we know that you come from a lineage of Mercers,
mm.
and you have a son who's also is continuing
He's
that
the
name
fourth.
forward.
Yeah.
So Mercer the fourth. Can you talk a little bit about your name and
Wow. That's a great question, man. I am so proud of that. My grandfather, my father, being the third means that we've kept a lineage going. My grandfather Shelton Mercer Senior, my dad Shelton Mercer Junior, me the third, my son the fourth. We can trace not just our lineage back to our homestead in North Carolina, where you can find Mercer Avenue, Mercer
mm,
Boulevard, Mercer Street, Mercer Five and Dime, the Mercer Mercantile, the Mercer Lumber Yard, which
yeah,
is a fantastic thing to see your name there. But we also have traced our heritage through multiple bloodlines, both on the obviously Mercer is a European originated from England, if you will, and then also obviously the African lineage in my bloodline, the Caribbean and Native American lineage in our bloodline as well. So we really are proud. I'm very proud to carry that name. My dad is my hero. My grandfather before him, both on both sides, really. But to carry that name is important. I'm so glad you asked that.
yeah.
I have had the privilege to name some of my companies after that last name, and sometimes you get into this ego thing, and you say, do you want to try to name a company after yourself because that could be
Yeah.
very egotistical. But I so loved I so love my dad who's still with us, and my grandfather, and that pride to be able to carry
Mm,
generations of legacy, that it was important for me to have at least some of the companies that would last long beyond me, I hope, to
yeah.
carry that Mercer name forward. And I have to give props to my son TJ, as we call him. He is amazing. Talk to him today. He's
Yeah.
also a Penn student and finishing up his senior year. And I'm so proud to be Shelton Mercer, one of them.
Yeah.
That I really appreciate you asking that question for sure. It's part of my true identity, and I lean into it as hard as I can.
shout out to the Mercer family. Also, shout out to your son for being a Penn grad. Also, and
Well,
some
soon to be. He's got 2 more semesters. You got to make
oh
it. He didn't make it
oh
yet.
senior year.
Senior
Okay,
year. He's got to make it. So, but he's doing fantastic. He's awesome.
that's cool. That's cool. All right, so getting into Philadelphia, and we know you're Philadelphia born and raised. What was it like growing up in Philadelphia during your time?
Well, I'm a lot older than you guys. I grew up I'm the '70s born, '80s baby, as they say, raised in the '80s. Philly was we were out in the edge of the city and supporting. We had a great upbringing there, and I loved growing up. Had a very diverse neighborhood. We had I remember us having. You guys can hear me still?
Yeah.
Okay. We had Ukrainian Jews on one side of us,
Mm.
Puerto Rican folks next door, Cuban folks on another house. Of course, people from a bunch of different places in the African diaspora.
Yeah.
And so I was fortunate to grow up in that Mount Airy, Oak Lane section of Philly. So it was much more progressive even back in the '70s. My parents were able to get a house there. My dad came through the military, got the GI Bill, and set up a life for his family.
Wow.
And we took that to those levels. I'm a proud graduate of Central High School in Philadelphia. Go
Shout out to
Lancers! So many
Central.
of my CHS folks, my class
Yeah.
number 247 for the folks who are Centralites.
I learned
um,
that Central is a real Central pride. Like people who I
oh,
meet
we are we
went
are
to
we are
Central.
total secret society, man.
Yeah.
You say that class number and it ends. The conversation begins. It goes a whole different way.
Mm. And I know when we first connected, something that we spoke about was our mutual love for hip hop. And
Hmm.
you mentioned growing up in the 70s and 80s, and it makes me think about the beginning of hip hop. Because I remember most people would say that hip hop started in the Bronx, and that's probably the case. But there's a minority of people who tell me hip hop started in Philly. So I'd be curious to know what was it like growing up in Philadelphia during the '80s, especially in
Fantastic. Keep going. No,
yeah,
especially going. I'm sorry.
and what was the hip hop scene like during that time? Like as that
So
was to come into
so I'm
the
gonna give
fray.
you some. I'm gonna give you some real stuff. So first of all, Jazzy Jeff and First Prince used to do parties at Central High School every Friday night.
Mm,
And so I'm talking before they got their first record deal, after they got the record deal, after
yeah.
Will was on TV.
Oh, wow.
They were still doing parties at my high school. We were the epicenter
Yeah.
for what it meant. DJ Cosmic Kev, I think he's still on
Mm,
Power 99, and Lady
yeah.
B, legend in Philadelphia. All those rappers. There was Schoolie D was out there doing his thing. So we had the New York style for sure, but we had Philly. Philly was representing. Three Times Dope, EP, my boy EST and
Yeah.
Woody Wood, who's still doing great stuff in the city. Those guys were real deal. And I grew up writing rhymes. I grew up doing parties
Mm,
at the rec center in my neighborhood. Shout out to Finley Playground.
yeah.
My cousin and I used to think we were going to be the next, up and coming guys to get a record deal.
Yeah.
And I quickly decided to go into the academic route.
Yeah.
But man, hip hop is like anybody. Hip hop was life, and
Yeah.
being able to put my cassette tape in the recording, um, and just to allow that thing. We used to have a live rap show on Saturday afternoons, and that thing was crazy. And it was Lady B playing the latest cuts from New York,
Yeah.
from wherever we got it. So I'm a true hip hop head, man. I still live vicariously through some of the old school stuff.
Yeah.
But I love, I love Biggie. I loved, I mean, Pac is now, both of
Yeah.
them are gone, but that era was golden for me as well. So I appreciate both, and I appreciate rappers now.
For
I
sure.
mean, I give it up for my Drakes
Yeah,
and some of the other guys who are doing the thing. But I love hip hop, man. It's still part of my life.
definitely, definitely. Now, I think about the one of the companies that you were part of creating, Audigent, and I know
Correct.
that's media, entertainment, tech. I also noticed you guys added a blockchain component to it as well. It's also a blockchain company. Um, if we can get into, before we talk about some of the companies specifically, if we can get into how you found yourself in the innovation lane, because notice a lot of the work you've done over the course of your career have been around innovation. You're an innovator yourself, and even one of your companies, Virtuous Innovation, is doing a lot of work that's kind of connecting institutions and people and platforms. And so, can you talk about how you sort of got into that lane?
Yeah, so I'm very fortunate. I grew up wanting to figure out how things work, so I could figure out how they could add more value. Innovation is about that, right? Innovation is not necessarily, I always say innovation is what happens when you take an invention and you take an idea and you take a vision and you marry them together, you get innovation. So for me, as a young guy, taking apart my video games, my little handheld ColecoVisions, and my Walkman back in the day to figure out how they actually worked was part of the trajectory, if you will, the journey to learn how the system works. And I was fortunate to be able to work for one of the largest innovation companies in the world back in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, and the early 2000s. Lucent Technologies changed my life, traveled the world, did projects worth many tens and hundreds of millions of dollars with some of the biggest companies in the world. And so I learned that there's a, as they say, there's levels to this,
Yeah.
right? So I got to see those levels at 25 and 26 and 27. By the
Mhm.
time I was 30, I had worked with some of the top names on in Wall Street,
Yeah.
on whether it's the Nasdaq or the New York Stock Exchange, and I decided to take that and turn that into leverage, if you will, that
Yeah.
currency that you build when you do stuff with those big players, and start to create my own visions and some that are co-visions with others. And what we figure out is that we can now try to marry those together. So now a lot of what I do is being able to figure out how do we marry the vision from all of those global corporations with innovators who are out in the in the world today, bringing them together in real ways, whether it's those creators, the capital they need, the corporate partners that'll help them scale, and certainly colleges and universities play a big part of that because they're some of the producers of some of the most not just talented but also equipped innovators in the world.
Mm, love that. Yeah.
Yeah, so earlier you did mention your family's from North Carolina, and you do have, your name, here and there within the state. Just curious, do you come from a lineage of entrepreneurs, or how were you exposed to this ability to create and build, like you said, value within the ecosystem?
And the short answer is not really. Um, my my dad was a military guy and then worked in civil service at the Philadelphia Naval Yard for his life. My mom actually spent all her career at University of Pennsylvania and ended up getting not just her bachelor's but also her master's from UPenn.
Mm,
So it wasn't so much that it was the entrepreneurial bent, but uh, the value for excellence, the value for I will give them so much love because they just decided that they should just not they should be as hands on as necessary, but as least oppressive and obtrusive, and that can help me and my sisters thrive. And I think that just based on how I'm wired, they realized that I mean, listen, I went after the dream to be in the corporate C-suite, and decided at a young age that I'd rather create things that I could have ownership in directly And part of that, I was going to President's Club every year with a multi-billion-dollar corporation. I mean, when I was at Lucent, it was a $30 billion in revenue, not valuation. That was how much money they brought in a year. And I said, President's Club is great. These bonuses are great, but I'm getting a tiny, tiny fraction, but I'm producing all this value. So I had an uncle who was pretty entrepreneurial, and I kind of did some kind of that, you kind of have your little hustles when you're younger. I had all sorts of things that I would dream up, but it was really when you decide to create something that others want to invest in. And so being able to take in venture dollars, where people would say, we believe in your vision and we're going to invest in that early enough, so that you have the fuel you need to get that rocket ship to the launch pad and get it up into the atmosphere. Those things are life changers.
And can you talk a little bit about your experience moving? There's a certain structure in the corporate world, and then there's a little bit of, let me say, chaos, trying to be an entrepreneur and doing your own business. How was that transition for you, and what kind of motivates you and help you to, get it to where it's able to thrive?
It's fantastic. I think I will say being in the corporate machine helped me as a leader. I think that some entrepreneurs are very solo founder led, or they even lead just kind of very personal brand type companies. I've actually done sort of the opposite. I've tried to build enterprises and companies that were not dependent upon my personal brand as much as we might bring the personality and the gravitas. I didn't want to deal anything that had to do that if I wasn't there, it would not exist, right? You can have your own kind of solopreneurship, but building organizations, building companies where there are multiple layers of people, scores, dozens, some hundreds, perhaps even thousands of people that are depending upon the leadership that you bring, is a much different aspect than saying it's about me and how much value I can generate personally. And I decided that it was being in those corporate structures helped me to realize how you build complex reporting structures, how you create shared vision and inspire that in people, how you are able to build a board of directors who can hold you accountable, but also help you grow and scale. And then more importantly, how you can see other people pursue their dreams and pursue their visions and see them launch out from that tree of what you've built. Those things are something I learned in my early years in the corporate world, and I would not regret them at all. I didn't have the friction that some people have. I left corporate on my own volition in 2001, right before 9/11, and did not know that was going to happen. But of course, the world changed then. And that just sealed the deal for me that the next things I should do should be, one, things that I can have control and ownership of and pass on legacy to my family. Two, they should be things that have more resonating impact than just a bottom line or a Wall Street earnings report. And so that's where you'll see my interest in global philanthropy as well as entrepreneurship and company building really took off after 9/11.
Mentioned that a lot of the work you've done has sort of an impact focused lens to it. I know that you have the company that you built, Twit Change, for example, and I even think about your phrase, "live on purpose." Can you talk a little about how that phrase even came about, like "live on purpose"?
Yeah, everybody's got this kind of tagline thing. I think I'm trying to think when I first started using that. It had to be sometime in the probably mid 2000s, maybe early 2000s. And in fact, I'll tell you, I know exactly when it was about 2007. And I'll give one of my dear mentors some credit, Carson Pugh, who is I'm part of a global leadership community called Arrow Leadership. And I used to talk about doing things on purpose and living a full life. And one day Carson challenged me in '07 and said, listen, I want you pursue your vision on purpose, right? And not just like let life
Mm,
happen to you.
mm,
Don't just be a victim or a recipient of what the winds and the streams bring you. Do it on purpose. Dolly Parton, of all people, has a quote that says, find out what you're good at and do it on purpose.
mm,
And I decided to adapt that tagline. Still follows me. Living on purpose for me means that I do everything with intentionality, from my personal relationships with family and friends, and to my professional relationships with employees and partners, clients and investors, to my decision to do this thing with you. I mean, it is
yeah,
on purpose. My relationship with Aki is very important to me, and
mm,
so to be available to do this, to spend this time with you guys, has more to do with a purpose driven life, where I look at our relationship and say that I want to make sure I make this time because of the what's been invested. And frankly, IK, you've invested tons of hours into helping some of that dossier that you read
yeah.
uh, grow and glow. And so I do everything I can on purpose.
No, 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 I love that. I love that. Man. So the next thought that kind of comes to mind are some of the early conversations we had about the companies you ran. So, for example, you speak about your experiences actually in athletics because I ran track and field back. I ran track back in the day, like as people say, and like
Back in
you
the
had
day was much more recent for you than it was for me, man.
you had an athletics company that you built, very early on, and you've gone on to, and I said this in your intro, you've gone on to do so many things in so many different lanes. How do you manage it all?
Well, I mean, let's think about. I hate to be like that guy. Like I'm coming on
Yeah.
your show, and I'm gonna give you the props that you deserve. But let me put it this way: how much of the laboratories that you were managing at Pennovation did I have intimate knowledge of?
Mm.
Very little, right?
Yeah.
However, when you came in the door and we set up for you to be the land manager there, we set the table. I gave you the vision and our plan, our roadmap, and trusted you and surrounded you with people who had like expertise, and trusted you to lead and to take us to the next levels.
Yeah.
You didn't hear from me every day up in your grill like Aki, or do
Right.
you have the RO water stuff right? That's not what I should be doing. What I should
Right.
be doing is identifying amazingly talented people who have drive and ambition and integrity that I can trust, and we give them the tools and resources they need, and give them the guidance and the coaching and the mentoring. Surround you with other leaders that can help you. Surround you with peers that can help you. And that way, I'm not doing all of this. It is the amazing people that are doing the actual execution, the work. For me, it's, am I effectively transmitting a vision? Am I inspiring a shared vision where people feel like this is really my thing? I really have ownership here. And that way, I'm not here trying to, one, take all the credit, but number two, managing it has to do with managing it through other people and making sure I'm the best type of leader that can help them with all of the things that they need, the resources they need, knocking the obstacles out the way when there are some, shutting down some BS if it pops up if I need to, but more
Yeah.
importantly, letting them know every day I got your back, but you're part of a bigger story. And I am so grateful to whatever you bring to the table, because it is part of that narrative that allows somebody to say, how do you do all this? I say, well, it's very simple. I don't. There are amazing people who do all of this. And I try to stay out of their way and give them everything they need to be successful.
Now, to piggyback off of that first question, that skill set, right, of the leadership, of of being able to provide the resources, of identifying talent, of crafting a vision that makes others excited to be a part of, where does that skill set come from? Does it come from having the experiences in sort of the corporate structure and seeing companies be built? Does it does it come from developing that skill set? Can you speak a little bit on that aspect of it? Because you speak on the on managing through others, but there's also the skill set of sort of setting the table that we can't overlook.
Yeah, it's both and probably even more, right? It's not an
Mhm.
either or. Um, the Certainly you can learn techniques. I've learned a lot of techniques over my life. I've taken every single leadership management course there is known to man, particularly early in my career. I knew I wanted to be an equipped and skilled leader. You can be, we talk about natural born leaders, and I do believe that there are some people who are naturally have a inclination and an instinct to be kind of that leader of the pack. But it doesn't mean they're effective leaders, right? So to be an impactful leader, you have to study, you have to hone your craft. I look at some of the best athletes in the world. Obviously, the GOAT, and you can fight me, anybody can fight me on this, all our new generation, but Michael Jordan is the GOAT of all GOATs. And there will never be another GOAT. But I look at, rest in peace, the dear Kobe Bryant, someone who I love dearly, who was he was the baby GOAT, if you will.
Yeah,
Both of those guys tenacious about how they worked. You can be very talented, but if you don't put the time and the work in
yeah,
to do game speed practice, Jordan used to practice at game speed. All his teammates say this mother effer would come in there. Excuse my colorful language, but this dude would challenge us
yeah,
in practice at game speed and make sure we all did the same thing. And if you didn't, he would be ready to fight you. And so it is that type of, in the laboratory, proving yourself, practicing these skill sets, seeing what really works. But then there's the inner work on who you are as a person. Now, I do value being what I hope is a blessing to other people.
yeah.
I don't just want to help people make money, I want to help people live better lives. And so, my kind of multifaceted approach to leadership is that I don't need to just have the most high performing, high grossing types of enterprises. I need to be helping to produce leaders of integrity, leaders with character, an environment where people thrive because there is true camaraderie, there is true authenticity. It's why I created Virtuous Innovation, because I wanted to bring all my worlds together and be able to put those virtues on the table as things that can build scalable, very profitable, very successful companies, but you don't have to be an a-hole while you do it.
Yeah.
And you can be doing things that are improving the lives of other people. But that comes through a lifetime of actual intentionality, of working on the craft, and surrounding yourself. I have some great mentors, both at the peer level and some above me, that I spend time with as much as I can so that they can challenge me on not just does this work from a financial or a strategic place, but am I being the most authentic Shelton as I pursue whether it's a new venture or look at a new partnership or collaboration or have to make really tough decisions about the organization? Am I surrounding myself with people who can challenge me about more than just the bottom line, but what it means to be a really decent, amazing human who can still get the outcomes that others crave for?
That's a great answer.
Yeah. So there was a couple of things I'm curious about. You did mention purpose-driven life and also being people of integrity and virtue. It kind of, and again, if I'm jumping the gun here, it kind of ties into being an ordained minister. If you can highlight, how did that come about? And it's kind of part of your journey and your story.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still an ordained pastor. I actually performed a wedding, and unfortunately, a few funerals over the COVID time that it wasn't necessarily. You don't want to do those, but I grew up in a family of faith. My parents are dear Christian people. Sent me and my sisters to Christian schools growing up. I learned under some really dynamic pastors. I studied the scriptures in both informally and formally in seminary as well. And I decided that I wanted to, in about '02, I believe, I was in youth ministry and family ministry and other roles before then. But in '02, we were ordained to plant a church in Philadelphia, Philadelphia Bible Fellowship. I love those folks, great congregation. Spent a lot of years of my life, not just teaching the principles of the scriptures, but also living it out and trying to help people live those out. My life now is more about how do I practically exhibit those really great characteristics that people equate with strong faith and strong values, if you will. I think that regardless of a person's religious affiliation, it's really about who we are as humans and are we pushing forward those types of universal principles of goodness and virtue and integrity and brotherhood and camaraderie and authenticity. But the ministry stuff played a big part. I'm still in touch with a lot of my ministry folks in the Christian faith and frankly in other faiths across the board. And I value those relationships. I chose not actively work as a pastor for a variety of reasons. Mostly because there's a wider platform globally that we can be impacting. And while I respect the local church ministries and other houses of faith at the local level, they're necessary for people. There are some broader issues in the society they're difficult to attack when you're kind of relegated to those kind of enclaves that we build in our faith communities. But I still have high regard and respect for them, and much love for many of the folks that we've had the chance to minister to. My social media, frankly, my Facebook and Instagram and even Twitter, like so many of my former church members are still connected there. So we got mad love for all of those folks and want to see their lives continue to rise and soar.
That sounds great. Oh, and then just one other thing. So you were able to have a lot of success through your lifetime uh, as a minority. So, what are some of the challenges or some of the hurdles you might have faced? Being a minority in the corporate world and in the entrepreneurial space, and how did you overcome it? And for the up and coming leaders of the next generation, what's some advice you would give them in order to be in a similar position as you are?
Man, listen, I will say, I'm repping the new brand. Virtuous Innovation is a
Mm.
company that we started. Actually, I started talking about this before the pandemic and doing talks around this as a place that I knew my life was moving. I think during the pandemic, we decided to actually create a company and corporate structure around that and push that out into the world. And we're doing some really amazing work with corporations, with universities, with uh, government at every level, from the White House to many other local governments, nonprofits, civic and social institutions. More importantly, it's the innovators themselves, the people that are driving solutions to make the world a better place. There's a quote that I love that Brian Stevenson, the great civil rights attorney, who the movie Just Mercy was based on, he says that our visions of technology, design, entertainment, and creativity must be married with our vision of justice, compassion, humanity, and equity. I might have added the equity part on there, but that's one of my favorite words. But I respect Brian immensely, and I that quote helped me really galvanize what it was that next thing I wanted to put out into the world. And yes, as a young non-white male in America, in growing up, I grew up in the '70s. Went to college in the late 80s, early 90s. I have had many challenges, even in my adult life. I shared with somebody the other day. I said I had a challenge when I was a young guy growing up in corporate where where white folks didn't want to report to me as a young leader, and I had a situation where I was recruited to take over an organization by a board, and had white folks that said, "We don't want to report to this guy." Right? Stuff happens. The macro aggressions, they continue to happen. I will say I feel very blessed that I've not had some of the horror stories that some of my peers have even had, and some others that we've read about in their corporate place. But I'll be honest, when I was a young rising star in Lucent, I'm 24 years old, they give you a gold card and say, go conquer the world. Every one of my decisions was questioned, was examined, was forensically picked apart at times. Not just because there were many dollars on the line, but because I relegated it down to it. The guy who didn't have as much melanin in his skin and hair was maybe a finer pattern. He didn't get that. He was able to get away with whatever the hell he wanted to do, right? I think that we're at an inflection point in society where we have so many competing challenges coming through a once in a historical pandemic that we are all too cavalier about the wake of that and what that's done to us all in our psyche. Also, many of us physically, people are grieving both their loss of loved ones, but also loss of livelihood or loss of normalcy. And the world has shifted there. I think that when it comes to being a person, a minoritized person in a Western society, that those folks who are in leadership, the tendency is to try to either become super pro your ethnicity and the group that you want to represent, or become so agnostic and vanilla that we can't recognize, like, what are you for, right? What we've decided to do is to lean into the fact that we celebrate the excellence of people who are not represented at the tables of leadership and influence. So we celebrate and we amplify and we identify women leaders who need to be more heralded and have more opportunities to grow and scale their businesses. We celebrate and amplify minoritized people of color, Black folks, Latin folks, Asian folks, folks that don't have indigenous folks who are traditionally, institutionally, historically boxed out of the wealth building. I'm in a place right now where the wealth is astounding, and the generations of wealth that have been able to provide people just casually going about their day, living in $7-8 million mansions doesn't even faze them. And I'm not about that type of hyper, get rich stuff. But I am about, let's help people who have traditionally been locked out build wealth for their families, build a future and legacy for their generations. It's about having a heart for both understanding that everybody that's in the system didn't cause the system to happen. And I think we're finding fatigue in our culture. A lot of white folks are tired of talking about the stuff that they say they didn't cause, and they are so pro equality, and they're pro all those things. They say I posted, I put the black, I went black on Instagram. I marched, I gave, and I'm tired of being. So we got to deal with that too, and say, how do we counteract that fatigue of this kind of virtue signaling slacktivism that people have seen, and now we get the real issues, and they say, well, because some people say, well, haven't y'all got it yet? I mean, come on, we did all this stuff. Stuff should be better. And so I realize it's a long tail. I've got to get into a vision, and we've created a 25-year vision to say that in the next 25 years, we've got to impact a certain measure of outcomes. And I won't bore you guys with what those are. We'll have, on our website, all that stuff there. But I will say this, that everything I'm doing today is about some very key goals. I have some goals for the year 2025, which is just short ways away, and then we got some 25-year outcomes that by 2025 we want to make sure that when people are ringing in the new year, that Virtuous Innovation has moved the needle globally. That's setting us up for some shifts in our culture for generations to come. That we can look at 25 years down the road and say, this stuff actually mattered.
Mm, man, that's that. I feel like you really captured the essence of where you're looking to take things, and we would love to hear a little bit more about virtuous innovation. I think it's very admirable the impact focus that you have and that you've had throughout your career, especially when it comes to certain spaces. This idea of being able to do well and also do good is something that not everyone values, and it's really admirable to see. Um, can you talk a little bit more about virtuous innovation? However, you mentioned this 25-year vision that you have for this enterprise, and you've mentioned a number of different aspects to it. Can you talk a little bit about what that grand vision is?
Yeah, so we're really doing a few key things. One is building upon part of the movement that you were involved in. I mean, being able to be a part of both the strategic vision, the direct, down to the color of the chairs, planning and execution of launch of a place like Pennovation Works and Pennovation Center with UPenn was very intentional on my part. Certainly, they had to select, choose us to do it, but it was very intentional because I felt that I needed to build a portfolio that had not just the name stuff. Penn is obviously a Ivy brand, enduring brand, but it was more about if we can create places where people can point to and say innovation is happening here, right? There's no
Mm,
doubt when you go to Pennovation, you see robots flying around, walking around, laboratories,
yeah.
autonomous vehicles, all of the activity there. There's no doubt in your mind, 3D printing, somebody's doing something, some sort of extra stuff here, right? Those types of places are important. So the placemaking thing is something that I decided to really lean into. We've launched, right now I think we've helped launch over 100 acres of innovation space around the nation, over almost close to 100 and to 1.5 million square feet. Penn is one, Indianapolis, places in suburban DC, and we've been working in Jackson, Mississippi, on some things with the crew there on some how to not just tackle Jackson's really acute issues, but actually the long term of how Jackson can compete in the innovation economy. That placemaking is important. It's also very important that we're doing the type of program creation and management. But what also is the biggest thing is the people. And so what we're doing is we're identifying some of the most iconic, some of the most energetic, rather, innovators who have at their core, they're working on, they're building, they're scaling, they're ideating innovations that are going to shift the now and the future. We are giving them a platform to be able to amplify their message and people to be in, and also for people to get involved in their mission. But we're also building, along with that, resources, capital resources to invest in those companies to make sure that those founders and those innovators have the resources they need. And then it's the connective tissue of the corporate community, the policy and government community, the general public at large, media and entertainment, bringing all those together. That quote I mentioned from Brian Stevenson earlier. How does those worlds come together to create a more equitable reality and a more equitable future for people out there? So we've got some digital media platform properties coming out to the market in this next 6 months. We've got some very public partnerships that'll be announced in the fourth quarter of this year. Again, along every genre, we've got some great corporations who've been working with us. colleges and universities, associations, professional associations. The list goes on. Venture capital partners, accelerators and incubators, celebrities. Pretty much, it's a kind of amalgamation of my world, and we're going to put that out to the public in a way that they can get it and understand it and be involved. And then that call to action. If you want to support the future of innovation, because we believe our future depends on it, then we got to support virtuous innovators, because we want to do more than just have breakthrough technologies and breakthrough fancy things. We want to see people's lives shift and change. We want to set up the future so that kids growing up in cities and rural communities and suburban communities and slums and forgotten places around the world have a viable future and have some hope that they could actually see themselves out of those situations and transform the places where they are, so that they can become places that aren't anymore forgotten, but they are heralded on the stage as some of the places that we love to laud, whether they've been Silicon Valley, Wall Street, Madison Avenue, or Kensington Palace. We're committed to that vision, and there's a lot of amazing people. I want to give shouts out, since it's Philadelphia, former mayor of Philadelphia, Mayor Nutter, my dear mentor for many years and colleague and friend, is part of our movement, part of our company. As a principal and co-owner, my good friend Peter Cherukuri, who built Politico and Huffington Post and the Roll Call and many others, is also part of the company. Lowell Thomas, who was a policy genius for Governor Rendell and some others. I have some real strong council of elders around me, and we're adding more talent and vision to the team. But coming this fall, people will have an opportunity to get involved and learn all about what we're doing and who's at the table. And I couldn't be more excited, because after this, I'm trying to retire and hand you guys the baton to take everything to the next level. Man, so I can be in places like this all the time.
We appreciate you sharing the vision with us. And Shelton, I know that you're at a conference too, and we can ask you a few more questions before we let you go. And some of them will be more lighthearted, but my next question.
You guys like Jesus and Mero over here, huh? Rest in peace to them too.
Yeah, man. Oh man, that's a whole nother conversation. But when it comes to the future that we're going into, and you mentioned people being tired. Like people I feel like a lot of people in general are tired, and even when you look at this country, the economy, and like all these different things. But at the same time, there's so much progress happening when it comes to technology, and when it even just comes to how society is evolving overall. What are you most excited about when you look at technology, innovation, and these kind of forces that tend to push, whether you want to call it culture or civilization, forward?
Wow, man. So I think I'm a big proponent of Web3 and decentralization. I think that the democratization of people being able to, one, own their own content, right? The value of owning your stuff cannot be understated. When you own what you've created, you have every opportunity and advantage to take it to the next level. Mm-hmm. I think we are seeing some clawing back from the powers that be. It happens all the time, right? You saw what happened in the crypto markets, where cryptocurrency is starting to become like, sorry, how many dips we gonna get? Because I bought the dip and it dipped some more, and I bought that next dip and it kept dipping. And it's like, we dip some more, we're gonna play the limbo with all these coins, right? Yeah. But I think it's more than I think the currency side. You mentioned something about Autogent, and I'm very proud of Autogent. Just founded that company in Philadelphia in Rittenhouse Square. I co-founded that company in 2015, 16, and we just made the Inc. 1000 hit the first time at number 249, one of the top companies, ad tech companies in the country right now. Fantastically proud of that. And one of the things we decided was blockchain integration was going to be key, and but the technology of blockchain around protecting attributions and encrypting transaction. It wasn't about the currency side, right? I think that the problems we're having now are the establishment is saying to folks, yeah, you guys had a nice party, but we're gonna have to take some of that stuff back. But I think that the push for content and intellectual property ownership and the ability to own and monetize your IP, whether it's a video, an NFT, a patent, an invention, lines of code, those things are game changers, because we can now take people who don't have access to traditional bastions of elitism, whether it's through Ivy institutions or capital, what have you, and they can monetize their own. We're seeing it all the time, right? I mean, it's as simple as whether it's a kid that's an influencer on his social media and making, a few $100,000 a year, putting out their own life, if you will, to somebody who says, I'm going to figure out a way to help improve asthma outcomes for kids in my neighborhood because I grew up in that kind of environment. I want to solve something like that. I think we're seeing that the traditional structures of how you get an idea turned into an invention, turned into a scalable product or service, which can be then become a business, a company, an enterprise. There's still, the principles are there, right? But more people are able to enter into the marketplace. And I think that the one thing we want to be able to do is to provide those pathways for them to scale those individually owned, decentralized properties that they have, so that they can build wealth for themselves and their families without necessarily depending on venture capital or bank loans or some type of validation from a third party. Those things excite me a lot, because they give the power to people, and we can be the virtuous leaders that say, we don't want to become the robber barons that then say, or that kind of pimpology that happens all over, where it says, look, yeah, you guys can put out a hit, but let me be your manager and rob you from your IP and try to take advantage. It's more like, how do we promote you as a group and a class of people, as a category of innovators who are able to impact the world in a different way, and make sure that those who are in those traditional silos or ivory towers, because we sit there too, we can say to them, no, wait a minute. There's some ways that you guys are not seeing. These folks are generating as much value, maybe even more, than some kids from an Ivy League school that have generated no revenue, but you've pumped millions of dollars of seed capital into, hoping that one day they're going to hit it and pop and move forward. Meanwhile, they're able to buy all the latest things they want to do and be on their TikTok and their Instagram, riding around in a car that you help them pay for with your VC dollars. That part, I think, there's going to be more demand for real outcomes based. I think we're going to see more companies that are actually acquired, that have taken no venture capital over the next 5 years than we have in probably the last 15. And I think we're going to see more founders of color, more women founders, more diverse founders who are able, whether LGBTQ plus community, who are able to achieve those levels of success that have traditionally been relegated to certain people who look a certain way, who come from a certain place, who have a certain relationship network.
I appreciate that answer. And speaking on Web3 and the ownership of content, IP, scaling that, I'll say, like, our hearts are in a similar place. So it's cool hearing you articulate that.
No, I was just gonna say your I guess, the evangelists of Web3
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
since the NFT event.
Who you guys are
Oh no,
Web3
he
evangelists?
Yeah,
Yeah, good.
I don't. They're probably tired of me bringing
I've
up
seen some of
Web3.
your stuff, brother. I'm appreciating it. I love it. I love it.
No, for sure.
Keep preaching that gospel.
Yeah. Well, this my last question is, our organization is called One Jollof, and we always ask our guests this question before we close out the show, and that question is Nigerian jollof rice or Ghanaian jollof rice?
Whoa, boy, you got me. Why did I knew you were going to go there? Why didn't you go there? I will tell you what. Both of them have warmed my belly many, many times. And so shout out to all my wonderful Nigerians. Shout out to all my awesome Ghanaians. And shout out to everyone else in the diaspora who produce amazing food. And that's my answer, and I stick by it.
Shelton took the route of diplomacy.
Hey, man, listen, we learn from the best. And guess what? If you guys want to have a taste testing, we'll put Ghanaian and Nigerian next to each other. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to say the same thing while I eat from both of those dishes.
He said, I don't want the smoke. He said,
I don't want that smoke. I don't want none of the smoke. None of it.
Shelton, this has been an honor and a pleasure, having this conversation with you. Appreciate your time.
One last question.
So
another rounding question we usually have. If you have any advice for your younger self, let's say fresh out of college or something like that, what's the word of advice you would give to your younger self with what you know today?
Never give anything away for free or less than its value to people who have a whole lot more resources than you have. There's no such thing. Discounts belong to people who don't have as much or who've earned some right. I gave a lot of discounts when I was young, right? A lot of people tell you, do this thing, you get put on, whatever. Screw all that. You need to make sure that you are getting the value for what you bring, and that the people who are acquiring your talents, services, ideas, products, whatever, that the value that they give back to you is commensurate with their resources to pay. Don't let folks shortchange you or try to play you short, because they will do it.
Man, I was gonna ask you if you can close out the show with some words of wisdom, but I don't know if that right there is a lot to ponder. Right? So.
Man, I half the baby with the Nigerian and Ghanaian, and I gave you that. Those you good. I'm gonna go on a losing streak if you keep me going.
Yeah, no, I feel that. No, Shelton, we really appreciate your time. And thank you so much for coming on the show. I look forward to seeing you soon.
Hey man, so proud of you. Both of you guys are doing amazing work. Keep it up. My love I have for you, Aki. I'm so excited to be a part of this, man, and looking forward to being more and seeing you continue to rise and soar. Everything we have, we give to the leaders and the innovators that have helped us build. So, we are always here for you to help you access wherever you need to get to and whatever resources you need to grow. What we have is yours.
Michelle, I really appreciate your support, your time, and also just for continuing to inspire so many people and just watching you continue to take things to the next level, in each stage as you continue your career. So, no, thank you.